Shabazz, break it down with the proper perspective. So much controversy and a lot of deception. You don't know who's coming through with the light and reflection, and whose mouth is mumbling, trick knowledge deceptive. Shabazz, break it down with the proper perspective. So much controversy and a lot of deception. You don't know who's coming through with the light and reflection, and whose mouth is mumbling, trick knowledge deceptive. Shabazz, break it down with the proper perspective. Shabazz, break it down with the proper perspective. Break it down with the proper perspective. Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2. So as we wait for a second to see where we are with this mic check, the outside volume is working. There we go. Now I know for a fact that we rocking and rolling. So we will begin. Thank you for tuning in. If you are paying attention, if you're not in live on another device, okay, no, cancel that. So in some way, shape, or form, I know that I am live on TikTok. I am live on Instagram. Thank you for tuning in on TikTok and Instagram. I cannot see you on TikTok for some reason, unless I cut it off. So I will end the other one and go live on TikTok, going live on Instagram. So now that I'm live on everything, how y'all doing out there tonight? This is Shabazz with the proper perspective. I'm trying to step on some toes tonight, but we will see if that happens or not. We are here to talk about blackness and how to run away from it. We're here to talk about colorism. We're here to talk about the one drop rule and why so many people are advocating that we get away from it. That's racist. We don't need that rule. Okay, so shout out to anybody paying attention. Let's see. Let me give a shout out. Nicole CC111 joined on Instagram. And I'm trying to wait a few minutes to see if anybody is going to jump in to the TikTok universe. If you are joining on YouTube, please pay attention to the pinned comment I got up there, because my basic premise is getting rid of the one drop rule is not something that helps us. So who really benefits from this erasure? Who really benefits from this erasure? That's my pinned comment for the chat rooms. If you want to join in, if you want to type something on Instagram or TikTok, that's the first thing that I would like for you to respond to. But as I get ready, I am trying to pull together my, let me see what else I got. I got a PowerPoint presentation, so to speak, that I'm supposed to be using in tonight's discussion. Let me pull that up and get that over here as well. So let me put that right where it should be. So we got this PowerPoint pulled up, and we have the script, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, I do read. I read from my notes. So I will be pulling up my notes and sharing my screen. If you are on TikTok, if you are on Instagram, please come on over to youtube.com/ at the proper perspective. youtube.com/ at the proper perspective. So you can see what I'm sharing on the screen. And you can join in on the conversation in that way. But tonight's conversation is sort of inspired by something I came across on Reddit. And because it struck a nerve with me a tad bit, and it sort of reminded me of some conversations I've had in the past. It sort of reminded me of some uh, discussions I've had in classrooms. So I figured, okay, yeah, let me tackle this. So the question in and of itself, let me share the screen so you can see what I'm getting at. So I'm going to share the screen. And so the commenter said, weird question. But what are your thoughts on white passing black folk? What are your thoughts on white passing black folk? A lot of actual white people think that because white passing folk exist, they can maliciously pretend to be black. But it's very easy to sniff out a faker. Example, Rachel Dolezal, or Dolezal, however you say her name. And they went on to start, they posted up some pictures. And so if you're on YouTube, then you can see my screen and you can see the pictures that I have. If you're not, again, I prefer you come on over to youtube.com/ at the proper perspective. But I will try to narrate a little bit. So the pictures included Jesse Williams, the rapper who goes by the name Logic, the actress Nicole Ari Parker. What is that lady's name? Something Markle, the so-called black chick that married into the royal family in England. Leona Lewis, and a particular one I wasn't that familiar with, but her name is Izuka, and I'm forgetting her last name. But let me see if I can. I'll try to pull up her name again. I thought I had it. Yes, Izuka Hoyle. So again, if we're going by the examples in the post, and shout out to Tony, shout out to Cam788, shout out to Lincoln, shout out to Harlem Nerd, all on TikTok. Let's see. More likes can attract viewers. Keep it up. Okay, yes, please keep it up. Give me some more likes. On TikTok, only Lisa Love has joined. So again, thank you for tuning in. We're gonna get it started tonight. Like I said, I'm not too sure if I'm gonna be stepping on toes or not. I do feel like this is a rather controversial topic. And I may say some things that are unappreciated by all parties, by all shades within the black community. But here we go. So again, this topic, this commenter, the person wants to know, what are your thoughts on white passing black folk? So I'm gonna try to break this down and give you my thoughts on white passing black folk, but I'm also trying to tackle this question. A lot of actual white people think that because white passing folk exist, they can maliciously pretend to be black. But it's very easy to sniff out a faker. Now, I think that's rather interesting because I don't think it's that interesting. I don't think it's that easy to sniff out a faker. And I think that the example that the person used, Rachel Dolezal, I think that sort of proves my point that it's not that easy. I mean, the woman spent what, 10, 20 years posing, cosplaying, as they say, as a black person. She pulled the wool over all kinds of people's eyes. So in that respect, I'm like, well, no, it's not that it's not that easy. It's not that easy to sniff out a faker. By no means. Now, I have some thoughts. I have some feelings about some of the other people that are in this picture. I don't necessarily, I don't necessarily think that Nicole Ari Parker is a person that passes for white, and I don't think that she is a person that could effectively pass for white, at least not in the way that she presents herself on a regular basis. Now she do a couple of things. If she, if she wears some other types of clothing, if she wears her hair in a different way, maybe she could. I don't, I'm not too sure. Uh, Jesse Williams, again, I think that if you don't know who he is and you just saw him or someone that looked just like him on the street, I don't necessarily think that you would say, hey, that's obviously a white passing black person. And I don't think you would say that's a white guy. But that's me. Now, Logic, the rapper Logic, maybe he deserves to be on the list. I'm not that much of a fan of Logic in the sense that I'm not that much of a follower. I'm not that familiar. I've heard a few things. I've heard some of his songs or some of his freestyle verses or battles or whatnot. And I was a bit, perplexed the first time I heard him. And yeah, I went and looked him up to see who is this. But he of all of the, or at least of these three, he definitely has a look that could fool some folk. His look could definitely fool some folk. I won't deny that. So now when I get to Milani Marker, or whatever her name is, you might be able to tell. I don't necessarily have the greatest amount of respect for her, but that might be another thing altogether. The Leona Lewis, the first time I saw Leona Lewis, I didn't think, is she white? Now Izuka, she doesn't necessarily appear to me to be someone that is white or would be passing for white. Now, I'm not that familiar with most of these people, so I'm not saying that they don't pass for white. I'm just saying, okay, this is just my little intro. So again, that's the idea I'm trying to tackle tonight. Let me stop sharing my screen for a little bit. So this is the idea I'm trying to tackle tonight. I am in support of the one drop rule. Just in case it's unclear, just in case you're not sure, I am in support of the one drop rule. Now, I know that may not necessarily be what's in fashion. It may not be necessarily what's in style when it comes to these types of conversations. I've seen a lot of people tell me that I'm wrong. I've encountered a lot of people trying to school me and explain stuff to me. Please excuse me as I do this presentation tonight. I have the munchies, and they're calling very effectively tonight. So I am doing a little munching on some Chips Ahoy chewy cookies. But I'm gonna try to keep that to a minimum. But I'm extremely, I feel famished. So again, on the one drop rule and colorism. And I'm gonna try to, let me see if I can share my screen and get to my presentation. Or at least load it onto the screen so we can see that as well. Now, so this, in support of the one drop rule, tonight's discussion is an analysis of Black identity, colorism, and white pretenders. Shout out to Jeffrey Thompson 418, who has joined on TikTok. Shout out to Roger 307, Melanie, who have also joined in on TikTok. I'm sorry, Jeffrey Thompson is on Instagram. So again, here we go. We are trying to work on this idea of supporting the one drop rule. Now, like I said, I support the one drop rule. And so that's what I'm going to try to defend tonight. Now, let me get to my next screen. Let me see, how do I maneuver to the next screen? Get this over here out the way. Yeah, I thought I had this. I had no idea that this document on screen was just so huge. Thought I had it already fitting. So, as you can see, so I'm supporting the one drop rule tonight, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, family. The one drop rule and colorism. So the one drop rule has unified Black identity in America. This is one of the reasons I'm in support of it. I know what people have said about it, but at least during the time, and maybe there's a difference between how it started and how it manifests today, but at least when it started, it served as a unifying factor. It helped unify Black identity in America. Now, yes, there were some outliers, but it gave clear, definitive value in how to define the Black community. So, like I said, it's been a unifying force, especially over here in America. Now, there's arguments to be made about American ideologies not necessarily being applicable to the rest of the world, and I don't necessarily doubt that. I don't necessarily contend with that. I'm not the kind of person that says the way we look at things is the way everybody has to look at things. At least I try not to fall on that sword. I try to stay open. But when you look at figures like Booker T. Washington, even to some extent Marcus Garvey, no, I'm not saying that he was a white passing Black person, but when you look at people like Marcus Garvey, when you look at people like Malcolm X, there is a thing to be said about how they were recognized and why they are recognized as part of the Black liberation struggle, the Black liberation claim all across the globe. So, there is validity, I guess is what I'm trying to say. There is validity in this one drop rule. Now, let me remind everybody, let me say this. A single stick may smoke, but it will not burn. A single stick may smoke, but it will not burn. What in the world am I talking about? This is an Akan proverb, Akan from Ghana. And it reminds us that solidarity, not division. Solidarity is what sustains movements. So the one drop rule in a way helps maintain solidarity, helps maintain the fold. It ensured figures like Booker T. Washington and Malcolm X were recognized as Black. And I would say, to some extent, because when you delve into this topic, you always have to be mindful of what they call in legal terms, in legal circles, they call it the slippery slope. So whatever you set up as your principle, your idea, you want to make sure that when it logically plays out, you're not falling down a slippery slope that will lead you somewhere you really had no intention of going, that will lead you somewhere that does more damage than good. Now, I will say colorism is a separate issue from the one drop rule. And we can have all kinds of conversations about what colorism is, how it plays out, when it manifests, why we should get rid of that. But let me also say, one of the other reasons I do support the one drop rule is because throughout the annals of history, we've had betrayals in the Black community. We've had manifestations of anti-Blackness in the Black community that did not come from the white passing Black folk, that did not come from the light-skinned Black, that didn't come from the octoroon and the quadroon and so on and so forth. We've had octoroons and quadroons that have done just as much to help the Black community, to help the Black cause, as the full-blooded Negro, if that's even a thing. Now, I'm not saying that the rule is without problems. By no means am I saying that. I would say now, but many of those problems happen in the extreme. When you have the extreme literal interpretation of the one drop rule, that's when you can get into some problems. And so, if you have someone who has one single distant Black ancestor, my great 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 grandfather, but then everybody else on the family tree is Mayo Mafia, okay, in those instances, in those terms, the one drop rule doesn't, or really it doesn't apply. And so that's why I'm like, but I'm sticking to the one drop rule because I know in the legal terms of it, it may apply coming from white folk, but in the Black community, it wouldn't apply. When you say, however, that you want to get rid of the one drop rule, what you end up doing is you're going to get rid of Barack Obama. You're going to get rid of Bob Marley. Now, if you are of a certain political persuasion, then you may not have a problem getting rid of Barack Obama. But if you are I'm not of that persuasion. Now, I'm not saying here I'm not stomping for Barack Obama. I'm not a person that I don't put Barack Obama on a pedestal. I duly recognize, however, that he has a Black parent and a white parent. So again, this idea of the one drop rule, or at least when people start saying they want to get rid of it, what they end up doing is reducing the numbers of the Black community by an extensively high number, an incredibly high number. Now, so like I said, if you're only looking at the extreme literal interpretation, I'll give you that. I'll give you, that type of one drop maybe needs to be done, maybe something needs to be done with it. But at the same time, when we're dealing with such an extreme example, those are not people that are jumping at the bit to live the Black experience. They're not chomping at the bit to be counted in the Black community. So again, it's like, so who are you excommunicating? Who are you getting rid of? When you have you have a white guy whose triple great grandparent happened to be Black, he's not living his life trying to hustle his way into the Black community for the most part. So in practice, the one drop rule has really played out in this extreme manner. Most people who are considered Black under this rule have a visible racial, if that's an okay term to use, because I know in today's circles, people don't want to discuss race. But if not racial, then cultural or ethnic significant connection to Blackness. Even if they're light-skinned, even if they're mixed. Now, again, and I'm not saying that a mixed person doesn't have the right to claim both sides. That's not what I'm saying at all. If you're mixed and you say I'm mixed and I claim both, I don't have a problem with you. I'm not talking about that. I'm only talking about the idea that we want to get rid of the one drop rule. So I would ask the question, where do you draw the line? And so, now the Yoruba say The crab walks sideways, but he still crosses the river. Yeah, here I go again. Here he go again with those proverbs. What do that even mean? Well, what it means is there are different paths to Black identity, and they can still lead to shared liberation, solidarity, unity in the community. The crab walks sideways, but he still crosses the river. We all trying to cross the river, like MLK say, and get to the other side of, whatever that was. But just because the crab walks differently from the rest of us, that don't mean we throw him off the boat, so to speak. Excuse me, mixing metaphors. I know you ain't supposed to do that in educated company. But again, this whole get rid of movement, campaign, ideology, to me, it just feels like a divide and conquer tactic that too many of us have jumped on board for. But we always do that. We always gravitate towards whatever the oppressor has set up as a divide and conquer tactic. And we just cling to it like, oh my God, this is such a valuable truth. Dwindling our numbers. So for me, the bigger issue is how colorism still operates within this American system of exploitation. Critics of the one drop rule often point to public figures like Jesse Williams or even the singer Halsey, who I will admit I was today years old when I found out that she is of mixed race or ethnicity or whatnot. So some people will claim her as Black and some people won't claim her as Black. And yeah, I'll admit I just found that one out today. I thought she was just a male mafia person with some good music. But again, mixed race celebrities who benefit from what they call proximity to whiteness. So now, if I'm digressing, let me say it this way: critics of the one drop rule often point to public figures like Jesse Williams, like Halsey, like the rapper Logic, mixed race celebrities who do indeed benefit from proximity to whiteness. And they use these celebrities to argue that the one drop rule dilutes Blackness. But here's my thing. Again, I'm not saying that there's no issues with the one drop rule, and I'm not saying that there's no issues with some of these celebrities. But in a very real sense, pointing this out and attributing it all to the one drop rule seems to conflate two different issues. One is colorism. So, colorism, at least colorism as it is defined, a hierarchy of skin tone, especially within Black communities, weaponized by white supremacy. You got to have all of that there. It's not just the fact that some of us are light and some of us are Black or darker. No, colorism is a hierarchy of skin tone within Black communities that is then weaponized. The weaponization is the key component to colorism, not just the mere fact that we have a variety of hues, because the variety of hues is just the scientific fact of what exists within the Black community. It's the weaponization of the variety. That's the problem. And then the other reason that I support the one drop rule, the other reason I don't like this notion of we need to get rid of them folk, is because, again, like I said, you are reducing your numbers of the Black community. We only exist as 12 to 13% of the nation as it stands. And here you go trying to reduce that. But you are also ignoring actual real life adversaries who don't even fit the mold. Now, so I have to remind you of the Clarence Thomases of the world. I have to remind you of the Candace Owens of the world. People who are viewed as fully Black. This necessity, this need, this desire to only count Black people when you look at the mother and father. You don't care about the grandfathers. You don't care about the grandmothers. You don't care about the great grands. Okay. But so when you look at Clarence Thomas and you look at Candace Owens and other people like them, there's no need of me giving a full rundown list, but y'all know it's more than just those two. These are people who actively work to undermine Black liberation, Black progress, Black positivity, Black girl magic, Black boy joy. And they would never appear on the white passing list or the white passing Black people list. So you do much better. It's more clever, it's more effective to spend your time getting rid of, castigating, talking down on the Black people who are actively working to damage the community than the ones who aren't actively working to damage the community. And now that's not to say that all light-skinned people got to fight for the cause. I'm not saying that. I'm not presenting that. I will say, however, since we're on this whole list of entertainers, because this is what we do more often than not, I'll say this: entertainers are poor examples. We should not be trying to create these social rules for our society based on entertainers, whether they be in acting in Hollywood or sports or what have you. But I'll also say again, you have many mixed race figures who are in the spotlight. So advocating to give up the one drop rule. So what happens to Colin Kaepernick, who went to great lengths to represent for the people and got all kind of flack, hurt his career prospects, kicked out the NFL because he took a knee to bring attention to what? Black people being harmed by racism. But he ain't Black enough. We don't need the one drop rule. Tell him to go sit over there on the sidelines with the white folk because he ain't Black enough. Again, this notion, you got these monoracial Blacks, Clarence Thomas, who weaponize their identities against collective progress. And you have this mixed race individual who weaponizes his racial ambiguity, who weaponizes his proximity to whiteness, who weaponizes his spotlight, shine, and fame to bring attention to the Black community. But he wouldn't do that if he knew, oh, we don't even count you. You can go ahead. Go on with the rest of them. And so again, now I'm thinking about there's a Hausa proverb that says the snake sheds its skin, but not its venom. The snake sheds its skin, but not its venom. Well, what does this mean? It means that abandoning the one drop rule won't stop internal betrayal. Abandoning the one drop rule will not stop internal betrayal. So, what is the purpose? If you're upset that there's some Blacks who are so light they can pass for white, okay, Have they taken steps to harm the black community like Clarence Thomas does? Have they taken steps to spread disinformation, to mix up and confuse the black community like Candace Owens does? Or are they just using their God-given natural essence to maneuver in this world like pretty much like anybody else does? Like if you're let's say you're an extremely attractive woman, you don't use your natural, these are things that you were just simply born with. You didn't have a say so in it. You came into the world and this is how you look. And as you see the world and you see how people in the world respond to you, do you not use whatever privileges might be given to you to your best benefit? You maneuver through the world as best you are. If you are naturally fast and you can run marathons, don't you join the track team? If you're naturally talented with strength, and for some reason you're built like a football player, do you not use those natural innate qualities to the best of your ability? What's the difference? So again, it's the venom of anti-blackness. It's the venom of anti-blackness, not mixedness. It's the venom of anti-blackness that does damage, that poisons solidarity, that hurts the cause, the struggle. Now, again, I say colorism is real, but it's a tool of divide and conquer. It's not proof that the one drop rule has failed. It's not proof that the one drop rule is interfering with our progress. You can't say, well, we ain't got reparations because there's too many black people passing as white. Like, what is the problem that we are addressing and correcting by abandoning the one drop rule? Well, it's racist. The whole country is racist. I don't see us jumping on airplanes to get up out of here. Christianity is racist. I don't see the vast majority of us abandoning the Bible, abandoning Christianity. You can't say that the Bible ain't racist. I said it. I said it. So again, ultimately, when you start attacking this rule, this framework, really you're scapegoating mixed people and ignoring that oppression thrives on collaboration, not melanin gradient. There has to be people who are willing to collaborate with the oppressors in order for this exploitation to continue. And you can't tell me that simply passing for white means that you're collaborating. Especially like, you got even then you have different levels, layers, types of passing for white. There are people who will pass for white, or in the past, maybe I need to come back to the main screen for this. Hold on. Keep that there. Stop sharing for a second. So, you have people in the past who have passed for white, but they look out for other black people on the low. There are people who have passed for white, but they only do that at work. They come right back to the black community. They still marry someone that is visually black. And then they reproduce kids that are darker than how they came into the world. So again, let me say, you know, like I said earlier, I'm not trying to say that because there is a controversy with light skinnedness, because there's a controversy with white passing black folk, because there's a controversy with the one drop rule. All light skinned people got to stand up for the fight. I ain't saying that. I ain't saying that at all. So don't try that one. But I'll give you another example, for instance. You know, when you start diving down the rabbit hole of this slippery slope, again, where are you going to draw your line? Because Malcolm X's mother will end up getting tossed out the group. His mother, Louise Little, who most wouldn't necessarily describe as a freedom fighter, although we probably could if we look at things a certain way. Perhaps there needs to be a reappraisal of her in this capacity. But for the most part, as you know, she was known as a Garveyite, I believe. She was known as a Garvey supporter. But she was of mixed race. She was of mixed African and possibly European lineage or blood descent. Historical records suggest that her father was a white man, just like Bob Marley. Historical records suggest, not even suggest, historical records for Bob Marley are clear that his father was a white man. Frederick Douglass' father was a white man. So when you get rid of the one drop rule, no more Frederick Douglass, no more Bob Marley, no more Louise Little. And if you don't have Louise Little, you don't have Malcolm Little. So despite this, Malcolm X identified as black and he embraced the history of his struggle, but maybe he wouldn't have if everybody was running around saying, you ain't one of us. You going over there and get in that other group. You ain't one of us. So this is why I'm like, okay, you may be right to have a problem with entertainers who do or do not consider themselves black, who want to or don't want to pass as white, who will or will not speak up for the black community. But these are entertainers. And you don't make a rule for the whole community. Remember, Malcolm X said we exist as a nation. So you don't make a rule for the whole nation because some entertainers don't behave the way you think they should. I mean, I'll be the first to say, yeah, I've been disappointed by entertainers, but I recognize they're entertainers. I don't look at them as my guide, as my model, as my representative. So I can't take them but so seriously. Now, if you are still tuning in, because I may have pissed somebody off so much, or I may have bored someone to death and they don't even want to listen no more. But if you're still here, I appreciate your presence. I'd love it for you to come on over to youtube.com/at the proper perspective. At least come on over to YouTube and hit the like button. Get my algorithm jumping on YouTube. Hit the bell for notifications. Drop a comment in the chat. Shout out to Mary X Thelm on Instagram. I got some people. I got some other people here on TikTok. I can't read their names. It just dot has joined. We'll appreciate your presence. So again, so now in conducting this discussion and having this little debate online with some other people, um, I was told that you can't break these things down only with an American lens. You have to look at how things are viewed outside of America. Okay, this may be true. I don't deny that. I'm fully aware that, for instance, in South Africa, they have a different set of classifications. So for the blackity black folk, they got black, and for the mixed variety, they have colored. And then for the white folks, for the male mafia, they got white. But even with that, even in even in this country, they may have been against it, but they finally came around to including biracial on certain government documents like the census or job applications or something like that. So even in that regard, as far as legalities is concerned, there is another identification. But I'm not necessarily here tonight talking about the legal frameworks. We know all too well you can't rely on the legal framework. When the police pull you over, they're not looking to see, is this person biracial? If you look black, you're going to get treated like a black person. Take away all of the fame that Barack Obama has. He ain't walking into no building. He ain't walking down no street without that fame and not get profiled. And I don't care how white his mama is. He will always get profiled. And he will always get viewed without the fame, without the prestige, without the power as a black person. If nobody knows what Bob Marley looks like, if the police don't know what Bob Marley looks like, and we brought him back to life and put him on the street, and he lighting up a blunt, they're not going to walk past him like, oh, that's just a mixed guy. Let's go look for some black people to harass. Nope. Your turn, bro. So again, I say the one drop rule has power. It has more positive power than negative power. It has power in unifying black identity. And this is not something that I'm saying just for America. So it's not something that's just in the contiguous 48. Now let me share my screen. And I'll tell you what I mean. So we got global examples of one drop rule creating a black identity and black unity and black solidarity outside of America. We have Vincent Ogay, a mixed race member of the colonial elite. This was in Haiti. Shout out to Haiti. Much respect, props. But he, as a mixed race person, he led a revolt against the powers that be. Now, his revolt occurred before the Haitian Revolution. So you can't say, well, he was just trying to. No, this was before the Haitian Revolution. You even have Vicente Guerrero. Who is that? That can't be no black person. That name sounds Spanish. Well, he was Mexico's, I believe he was the second president of Mexico, but he was a president, the official president of Mexico. And he abolished slavery. Why? He was mixed race. His mama was black. And he said, when I get into power, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to free everybody that's related to me. I'm going to free everybody that look like me. Whether I look like the darkest of the brethren, the darkest of the brethren or not. So without the one drop rule, he may have lived this life like I ain't got nothing to do with them people. They ain't got nothing to do with me. I ain't got no solidarity with them. But because of the one drop rule, he saw himself as a black person. And when he got into power, he said, you know, some slavery's over. That's it. Done. Now, my next one, you may disagree with me. I was a bit surprised myself, but I'll say this. Jean-Jacques Dessalines, there are some historians that say he's all black. Definitely. He's black on his mama's side, black on his father's side. I don't have a problem with that. That's what I always thought. But there are other historians who have weighed in and they said, no, 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 no. Y'all got it twisted. So there are some who say, nah, his father was white. I'm just here to say, if those historians are right, then he's a mixed race person. You can't say, nah, because he don't look like that. Barack Obama don't look like he mixed. No way in the world you gonna tell me Barack Obama looked like he mixed. So if those historians are correct, then Jean-Jacques Dessalines is a mixed race person. He is black because of the one drop rule. He was the emperor of Haiti. Him and Toussaint Louverture worked together to free the Haitians. But you want to get rid of him because you don't like the one drop rule. We run on over there to France. Now y'all know I don't even like France. I really can't stand the French. I probably shouldn't. I ain't supposed to be saying that. But Alexander Dumas was a French writer, and he was proud of his Haitian roots. He was proud of his black roots. Now, they didn't have the one drop rule in Haiti. They didn't have the one drop rule in France. But these are people who lived completely outside of the American lens, but they knew enough to claim their African essence, their African ancestry, their blackness. They knew enough not to run from it. I already mentioned Frederick Douglass, born to an enslaved black mother and a white father. All of these figures embrace blackness in their struggles, in their life, in their careers. But you want to give up the one drop rule because it's racist. What ain't racist in this country or across the Western world, across Western civilization? Just because it is racist doesn't mean you give it up. You have to work with the tools that are best employed for your progress. Shout out to Omega Nair and William Ames, who joined in on TikTok. Hit me with some likes, or however y'all do that on TikTok. Mash the screen so I can get some likes. Hit me with some likes on Instagram. Throw these waves. I hit the wave. I don't know if that helps or not. If you're on YouTube, hit the like button. Say something in the comments. Let me check the YouTube. There ain't too much jumping off in the live chat, but that's okay. Let me send off this notice. Let me stop sharing for a hot second. Okay. Send off this notice. So as I was saying, got these notices going. Pull up this presentation again. So you got all these figures who, if you give up the one drop rule, you're just deleting black history. Why are you trying to do Trump's job? Excuse me. Why are you trying to do orangutan's job? They've done enough work to get rid of our history. Why you want to help them? That's my question. Now, just as a visual depiction, Let me share my screen again. Again, if you're on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, you can't see what I'm sharing on the screen. I do apologize for that. I am not in control of those platforms. But feel free to come on over to youtube.com/at the proper perspective. You can join in on the chat and you can see what's being shared on the screen. So, global examples of one drop rule identity. And I have them in order of exactly how I broke them down. Vincent O'Gay, who is mixed breed, or I'm sorry, I know that's the wrong word, mixed race. Vicente Guerrero, Desaline, Alexander Dumas. Nah, that's not Alexander Dumas. That is Alexander Dumas. Alexander Pushkin, I didn't bring up, but Alexander Pushkin is another mixed race individual. He's from Russia, and he didn't shy away from his racial identity. And Frederick Douglass. So again, why are we deleting Black history? Why are we deleting Black historical icons? Just because I guess we're mad at a couple of entertainers today. If they're really sellouts, just call them sellouts and keep moving. You don't just delete the whole group. So, like I said, so I talked about that. So whether you're looking at politics, whether you're looking at literature and cultural figures, whether you're looking at, you still have this idea of global solidarity. The legacies of those figures should show you enough to say, wait a minute, there's some positivity with this one drop rule. At the very least, they are Black people. They are people who would, if you get rid of the one drop rule, you get rid of them. And when you get rid of them, you get rid of people who have fought against racism, fought against colonialism, fought against white supremacy. And where does that leave you? Where does that land you? How does that help you? Now, again, I'm not the one to say, I'm not saying that the one drop rule is perfect. No, not by any means am I saying that. There are definitely some problems with it. There are definitely some contradictions and trade-offs. Yes, indeed, the one drop rule was meant to protect white purity. But what it actually did, the idea of protecting white purity, that was for them. We didn't want them. We didn't want to be with them. We don't need to be with them. But what it actually did was empowered Black leaders. So the unintended consequence was just that. They didn't think that we would be able to use it to our benefit. Just like today, they don't think, just like in the 60s, they didn't think we'd be able to use segregation to our benefit. Back then in the 60s or up through the 60s, we were using segregation to our benefit. We built Black Wall Street. We built a Black economic powerhouse because of segregation. That wasn't their intent. That was our unintended consequence. So if you get rid of the one drop rule, you're sidelining very legitimate benefits, very legitimate people, leaders, historical figures. Now, if you compare what, the framework for it in America with the framework in Brazil, the racial categories are very fluid. And they got these terms like Pardo and Moreno, but all of this worked to dilute the Black political power until the Black people in Brazil started saying, you know something, this ain't helping us. This ain't helping us. So they started coming together and saying, we need to rethink this. All of this slicing and dicing and cutting us up into these little small pieces, and we're all still being exploited, and we're all still being racialized and brutalized. And they said, no, we're gonna start reworking this. That's what happens when you get rid of or don't have the one drop rule or a framework that complements the one drop rule. Like I said, segregation was not for us. That was for the preservation of white purity. Like I said, it's a hot button issue even today because orangutan is doing what he's doing. Segregation had its origins in protecting white purity, whatever that means for the Mayo Mafia. But the unintended consequence in its heyday, and hopefully in our near future, as we gather ourselves to recreate Black Wall Street, even if it's not in the physical, since orangutan insist on bringing back segregation, we will be insisting on only doing business with Black people. We will insist. We will insist on only doing business with Black people. So we will willingly separate ourselves and stop supporting the financial empire, their financial empire, and continue to build out our own Black economy. We're going to bring back Black Wall Street as a response to segregation, as a response to their racist tactics. So you don't give up a racist policy just because it's racist. You use that racist policy to strengthen yourselves, is what I'm saying. So the unintended consequence of the one drop rule is united worldwide Black solidarity. So there's this thing that says, the rule erases nuances, but it has protected, mm, but has protected against colorism. So I'll say, what in the world? What you talking about? What you talking about, Willis? Does the rule erase nuanced identities? Absolutely. Does it have to? Absolutely not. It simply says we all recognize that we in the same boat. In a world that weaponizes colorism, it's the one drop rule is often a bulwark. The Wolof have a proverb that teaches about this issue. It says, or it goes, the moon moves slowly, but it still crosses the town. The moon moves slowly, but it still crosses the town. What you talking about? Well, what that means is we got to have patience. We got to have patience. At least patience with the one drop rule. Because the one drop rule has historically has a role, played a role that doesn't mean accepting its limits. The challenge is honoring its legacy while leaving room for mixed voices to define themselves without letting racism or respectability politics dictate the terms. We don't have to let them tell us exactly how it works. If you got a blue-eyed, blonde-haired, Aryan-looking white guy, and he wants to insist that because he found one Black person more than likely a woman, on his family tree from the 1700s, more than likely she was raped, then he gets an automatic invite to the cookout. No, he don't. He just don't. That he gets to hold his hand out for a reparations check. No, he don't. He just don't. And if that's what's spurring the we need to get rid of the one drop rule, you need to just slow down and be patient. You need to calm down. The real issue isn't whether someone is white passing, but where do their loyalties lie? What is their behavior? I hate to make reference to Martin Luther King, but this is definitely an issue where we're supposed to be looking at the content of the character, not the color of the skin. We have to look at where their loyalties lie. We have to look at their behaviors. Are they standing up like Frederick Douglass? Or are they selling out like Clarence Thomas? We have plenty of undeniably black people who sell out their own every day in corporate America, in wage earning jobs, on the streets, in schools, in academia. The problem is whether or not you're for your people or against your people, not whether or not you're dark skinned or light skinned. So excluding someone just because they look ambiguous, I don't care if they look ambiguous. Who do they claim? And how do they act? Now, although I said Jesse Williams doesn't look ambiguous to me, I know a lot of people would say, "Oh yeah, he do." The post on Reddit that started me on this tirade, so to speak. That person says Jesse Williams looks ambiguous. He looks like he's passing for white. Okay. So what? He's passing for white visually, but every time you put a mic in his face, he talk about black. So how is he really passing? That's just a look. He looks ambiguous, but he doesn't behave ambiguously. He doesn't speak ambiguously. So it doesn't make sense to say we're going to get rid of the one drop rule. We're going to get rid of all of these light skinned people. And they the ones doing the fighting and the standing up. If they're genuinely pro-black, they welcome to the cookout. The bigger problem, and if I go back to that, let me see if I can. I'll tell you who the bigger problem is. Folk like this. White people pretending to be black is the bigger problem, is the real, not even bigger, is the real problem. Let me go back and grab that because it was the question that sort of set this whole thing off. So the real problem, the bigger problem, are the white folk pretending to be black. Now let me real quick insert well, I thought I had this. I wanted to insert a slide. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll do it this way. There we go. New slide. Set this up. Paste this. And I'm pasting this more for the question than the images. But this is why I'm saying this is what the bigger problem is. This is what the real problem is. So again, everything led off with the question, what are your thoughts on white passing black folks? But the real question that should have been addressed, the real issue that needs to be addressed is the actual white people who think that because there are white passing black folk that do exist, that they, as white people, the Mayo Mafia, the Envelopians, palm coloreds, that they can maliciously, or even not so maliciously, pretend to be black. That's the real issue. That's the real problem. Are they allowed to pretend to be black? Because I will say to you this, if there were absolutely no white passing black people, you would still have folk like Rachel Dolezal and Jessica Krug. It's not as though they were inspired by light skinned black people. They weren't inspired by Frederick Douglass. They weren't inspired by Chester Himes or W.B. Du Bois, at least not in the sense of they weren't inspired to cosplay as black. Now, you listen to some of their commentary, maybe they were inspired to help. Maybe they were inspired to to fight for the cause because they felt some kinship with black people. But they weren't inspired to cosplay because of those um, mixed race black people. So that's the real question. Rather than getting bogged down, rather than getting distracted, because that's the number one thing. Rather than getting sidetracked, rather than falling for divide and conquer tactics about how black are you? Are you black enough? You're black enough if you claim your blackness. You're black enough if you stand for black people when it's time. But the real question, the real issue is, what do we do about white people who cosplay? Well, to some extent, ain't nothing we can do. Now we can express outrage. If we discover them, we can out them. But this is where you really want to put your focus in, even if it's just for the sake of conversation. Even if it's just for the sake of conversation. Rather than getting bent out of shape over Jesse Williams or even the rapper Logic, get bent out of shape over Jessica Krug, who actively worked to take resources from black people. And Rachel Dolezal, who actively worked to take resources from black people. What does Nicole Ari Parker stole from the black community? What does Leona Lewis stole from the black community? Now, if you don't know who Jessica Krug is, I'm gonna try to share my screen. Let me pull this over to the proper section. I don't know where that's at. Okay. Not sure if y'all heard that interesting music. But Jessica Krug is a prominent scholar who outs herself as white, just as she faced exposure for presenting herself as black. So that's Jessica Krug. And so in this article, it says, following a marathon of deceit, Jessica Krug, associate professor, let me see if I can get this onto the screen the right way. associate professor of history at George Washington University, admitted Thursday that she is white and not black, as she had long claimed in an essay on Medium called The Truth and the Anti-Black Violence of My Lies. So she's admitting it full scale. Krug said that to an escalating degree over my adult life, I have eschewed my lived experience as a white Jewish child in suburban Kansas City under various assumed identities within a blackness that I have had no right to claim. First North African blackness, then US rooted blackness, then Caribbean rooted Bronx blackness. So she's been cosplaying all across the Pan African diaspora. Now, you tell me why we spend more time trying to determine which black people can we get rid of instead of trying to determine who are the white people faking the funk. I ain't gonna read the whole article, but I just wanted to bring this up. This is why I am not against the one drop rule. And you can't say, well, she could only do that because of the one drop rule. No, she could do that because she's white. Because, okay, even if you say, okay, no, she could only do that because of the one drop rule. So let's say we had gotten rid of the one drop rule and we had whatever you would call it, mixed, biracial, or colored, like in South Africa. She just would have ticked off that box and still walked around and said, I'm half black, I'm mixed race. So she still would have walked into that college claiming either North African, like she said, or Bronx blackness, and getting scholarships and getting jobs in that department as a half black. She'd still be cosplaying. Rachel Dollar's all the same. If you had a separation, she just would have clicked off the multiracial box. And she still would have said, I want to be president of the NAACP. I'm half black. These are the real problems. These are the real threats. Not black people who might be able to pass as white, but white people who actively try and pass, or I can't even say try, who actively successfully pass for black. And then they get scholarships that a black person could have got. They get jobs that a black person could have gotten. White people pretending to be black, white pretenders gaining funds, jobs, and influence meant for black people. Influence meant for black people. They don't just take up space in black communities, they also manipulate resources meant for actual black people. They often use their fake blackness to gain academic positions, cultural credibility, and even funding while spreading harmful misinformation or taking leadership roles that they have no business holding. Worse, when they get caught, what do? They fall back on their white privilege. They fall back on their whiteness and face very little, zero to little consequences. But you want to be mad at a black person who can pass for white. So why do we have less venom for these two? Why do we have less venom for the Rachel Dolezals, who's now has gone and changed her name again, and now she's claiming a West African identity? But why do we have less venom for these kind of people? Why do we have more venom for the blacks who are passing? Sound like jealousy to me. Sound like self-hate to me, more so than anything else. Are you just mad because you can't do it? Is that what it is? Again, I go back to this idea, we all maneuver in this world. We navigate oppression the best we can with whatever we have to do so. If you're very attractive, you use that in whichever way you can. If you're strong like Hercules, you use that in any way you can. If all women say they want a tall, dark, and handsome man, the tall, dark, and handsome man ain't gonna run from it. If they say they want light skins, then all the light skinned men start jumping. Everybody uses whatever God gave them to the best of their ability. So just because a person is passing don't mean that they're a problem. Because there's plenty of people that's not passing that could never pass, and they are a problem. Byron Donalds, in closing, have y'all seen that movie Passing? It's based on Nella Larson, a Harlem Renaissance writer who wrote a novel about passing. She was a mixed person, but she could only be considered black with the one drop rule. Once we get rid of the one drop rule, there go another black person out the fold. No Harlem Renaissance. But she explored the idea of passing in her novel, Passing. And she shows in her novel why intent, that's what I'm talking about, intent. What are you willing to do? What are you working for? Do you stand up for black people? She explored how intent matters. So, her novel critiques racial identity in passing. She said that identity is both personal and collective. It's personal and collective. So if you can have a personal identity and still see yourself as part of a collective, that is what's most important. That's the problem with Clarence Thomas and Candace Owens and people of that nature. They don't make the connection between their personal and their collective identity. Jesse Williams does. Leona Lewis does, at least to some extent. The key issue is solidarity, not classification. So again, Nella Larson's novel critiques the one drop rule, and it critiques it based on certain criteria, elements. It critiques its erasure of nuance, yet her character struggles also reveal the cost of rejecting blackness and rejecting black solidarity. So for every leader who thrived under the rule's unifying logic, yes, there have been some who have felt confined by it. Now, how do we reconcile this tension? Well, perhaps we give space, we give grace. We got to remember that identity, just like liberation, is both collective and individual. A river that flows forward, even as it bends. A river that flows forward, even as it bends. But if you haven't seen the movie, I highly recommend it. It's very interesting. So, again, I am in full support of keeping the one drop rule. I would like for us to spend more time on identifying authentic fakers. Isn't that an oxymoron? An authentic faker. Let's get rid of the Rachel Dolezals. Let's get rid of the Jessica Cruz. And let's make sure that we still stand in solidarity with people who don't necessarily, who may not come across as looking black. That's what I say. What do you say? Well, that's my time, ladies and gentlemen. That's my time on here tonight. So y'all know what I do at the end. I'm gonna play my theme song. I thank everybody for coming out. If you're on TikTok, if you're on Instagram, please take a moment to come on over to youtube.com/at the proper perspective. Hit the like button on this video, hit the bell for notifications. And if you care enough, drop a comment. I still got the comment in there. If it's not for us, who really benefits from the erasure of the one drop rule? Because I can't see a benefit from it. Proper perspective.